Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unlocking a vault on a topic that sits right smack on the bleeding edge of science, human psychology, and, well, the unknown. We are taking a highly structured, fiercely data-driven look into the world of modern parapsychology, or what researchers call psi research. Now, if you're thinking this is just crystal balls and campfire ghost stories, you might want to buckle up. We're about to dive into some seriously rigorous studies, advanced technologies, and massive data sets that just might change your mind.
So let's kick things off with a question. What if what we casually call the paranormal isn't actually supernatural at all? What if, instead, psychic ability is just a hidden, deeply biological mechanism of everyday human cognition? Just another quiet little tool our brain uses to solve problems and achieve goals without us even realizing it's happening?
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by reframing the paranormal, and then we'll look at measuring the unseen mind. Next up, we dive into quantum and global consciousness, touch on reincarnation and mediumship, and finally wrap up with modernizing psi research. Let's get into it. Section 1. Reframing the paranormal, the foundation of psi. Okay, before we actually look at the data, we really need to shift how we think about these phenomena. We have to ground the seemingly mystical into observable, foundational psychological frameworks. And a huge breakthrough in doing exactly that comes from Rex Stanford's PMIR model. That stands for psi-mediated instrumental response. Instead of treating psychic phenomena like some rare, isolated magic trick, Stanford proposes that psi is just acting quietly in the background all the time. So the absolute crucial point here is that the PMIR model suggests psi is an instrumental response integrated directly into our normal cognitive problem solving. It's really just another way we humans gather information to navigate the world and achieve our goals. It completely changes the game by pulling psi right into the realm of normal human psychology. And you know what? We can actually see the body doing this in presentiment research. Presentiment is when people experience physiological changes in response to future events right before they actually happen. So hey, if your heart rate just mysteriously spiked before I started talking about this, well, you might be demonstrating it right now. In the lab, researchers can actually detect these really subtle unconscious changes in heart rate, skin conductivity, and brain activity just before a future emotional stimulus is shown to a subject. It's a fascinating form of precognition, and it completely challenges our basic everyday understanding of time and causality. Moving on to Section 2, Measuring the Unseen Mind. Active phenomena. So how do researchers actually test this stuff? Well, scientists use incredibly strict methodologies to trigger and measure these active abilities in highly controlled environments. One of the absolute most reliable methods they use is the Ganzfeld experiment. This is pretty much a cornerstone of telepathy research. Step 1 involves placing a receiver into a state of mild sensory deprivation. They usually do this using white noise and literally taping halved ping-pong balls over their eyes to block out normal visual input. Then, for Step 2, a transmitter sitting in a completely different room attempts to send telepathic information to them. In Step 3, the receiver just reports what they're experiencing. And here's the wild part. Across tons of replications, this controlled setup has consistently produced statistically positive results. It really shows that when we quiet our normal physical senses, non-ordinary information actually can filter through. Another highly measured phenomenon is remote viewing. And let me be clear, this isn't just a fun theory. It has a profoundly practical history. Researchers like Joe McMoneagle produced highly accurate descriptions of distant, unseen locations during the U.S. military's top-secret Stargate project. Similarly, Stefan Schwartz has used remote viewing practically in hardcore fields like archaeology and military intelligence. But what's truly remarkable about where we are today is that remote viewing has evolved from these highly secretive military operations into a teachable skill. Literally, thousands of people have taken training courses and report firsthand successes. This growing evidence base is really challenging the broader scientific community to finally take notice. Let's move to Section 3, Quantum and Global Consciousness. Macro connections. Now, what happens when we zoom out, like way out, beyond individual cognition and examine the entire globe? Take a look at this number, 7 sigma. For context, in statistics, a 7 sigma event is virtually impossible to explain by pure chance. There's just no way. But this is the staggering result produced by the Global Consciousness Project. This incredibly ambitious experiment monitors a worldwide network of random number generators. Why? To see if collective global human consciousness actually influences random events during major world-shifting occurrences. The fact that their data consistently shows a 7 sigma effect strongly suggests a profound, unseen global interconnectedness. It really points to the idea that human consciousness might actually influence the physical world on a massive macro scale. And what's super interesting here is how we can zoom from that massive global scale all the way down to the subatomic level. Researcher Dean Radin has conducted experiments using the famous double-slit setup straight out of quantum physics. In his studies, participants were asked to use nothing but their mental intention to influence the behavior of subatomic particles and alter their interference patterns. And it worked. The positive results of these psychokinesis experiments completely blur the line between hard science and the paranormal, suggesting that human consciousness is directly, literally, linked to quantum processes. Section 4. Reincarnation and Mediumship. Beyond the Living.
As we keep pushing the boundaries of what consciousness can do, we inevitably arrive at arguably the most provocative territory in our entire explainer: strict scientific investigations into what happens after we die. At the University of Virginia, researchers like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker have spent decades rigorously investigating cases of young children who report vivid memories of past lives. What makes their data so incredibly compelling is the sheer, undeniable accuracy of the details. These kids often describe highly specific people, places, and events that they simply could not have known through any ordinary means. It's an aggregation of evidence that heavily challenges our conventional notions of linear time and the biological limits of the human mind. In a very similar vein, the study of mediumship has been subjected to some incredibly strict scientific scrutiny. Researcher Julie Beischel's 2021 phenomenological analyses broke this down beautifully into 2 distinct categories. Through blinded mediumship experiments, and by blinded I mean the medium has absolutely no prior information or sensory contact with the person they are reading, Beischel's team looked at survival psi, which is the reception of anomalous information from the deceased. They compared this directly to somatic psi, which involves psychic readings for the living. By applying this kind of exploratory quantitative analysis, researchers are actually mapping out the exact parameters of these non-local information transfers. Finally, Section 5, Modernizing Psi Research, the Science and the Future. So, how is the mainstream scientific community handling all of this data today? And what tools are researchers using to move the field forward? Well, a major milestone hit when Etzel Cardena published a remarkably rigorous, methodologically sound review of the experimental evidence for psi, and he published it in the highly respected journal American Psychologist back in 2018. It brought the data right to the forefront of academia, but the response highlighted an ongoing challenge. While many welcomed this rigorous meta-analysis, some skeptics chose a totally different route, simply dismissing the data entirely without actually engaging with it. Some even explicitly claimed that the best criticism is to just ignore the data altogether. It's a really fascinating look at the friction between established scientific paradigms and anomalous data. But here's the thing. The researchers who actually are looking at the data are actively solving the field's historic challenges. A big one has always been the decline effect, which is where a subject's psychic performance just naturally drops over time due to mental fatigue or repetitive guessing. But researcher John Palmer found that providing immediate feedback keeps participants engaged and effectively mitigates this drop. Furthermore, we now know for sure that altered states of consciousness, or ASCs, things like deep meditation, hypnosis, and that sensory deprivation we saw earlier in the Gonsfield experiments, make the mind far more receptive to non-ordinary information, dramatically enhancing overall performance. And looking to the future? The cavalry has officially arrived in the form of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. AI is now stepping in to analyze the massive, aggregated datasets generated by decades of psi research. It's out there identifying subtle, hidden patterns that human researchers might have missed for literally centuries. Meanwhile, quantum computing offers the very real potential to mathematically model the incredibly complex, non-local phenomena we've been observing. For the first time ever, we finally have the technological hardware to match the sheer complexity of the human mind. All of this data we've covered, from presentiment and remote viewing to the staggering numbers of the Global Consciousness Project and those UVA reincarnation studies, it all points toward a singular, profound possibility. As researchers aggregate this evidence, a brand new theoretical model emerges, and it's summarized perfectly right here. Consciousness may transcend the body and continue in new forms beyond a single life. It seriously suggests that consciousness isn't just some accidental byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental, interconnected property of the universe itself. Which leaves us with this final thought for today. The question is no longer whether these statistically significant anomalies exist. The rigorous meta-analyses confirm, without a doubt, that they do.
The real question is how they fit into our reality. As AI and quantum technologies continue to rip the veil off these massive datasets, revealing patterns we have never seen before, is it time to completely change how we understand the universe? I really hope this explainer sparked your curiosity to go out and look deeper into the data for yourself. Keep questioning and keep learning.